Hello there, I'm your Chief Economist, Matthew Gardner, and I'm delighted to have been asked to speak to you all at this, the 2021 kickoff. Today I'm going to give you my top 10 things to be on the lookout for in 2021. So, with that, let's get going. Number one, the economy. As you are all aware, the job recovery has slowed significantly over the past few months. And the December number, which saw employment levels actually drop by 140,000 jobs, well, it was really quite appalling. But as bad as the numbers were last month, I'm still expecting to see solid employment gains this year. Now that said, I don't see significant improvement until the vaccine starts to be distributed widely and that a majority of us, well, are we going to choose to take it or not? I hope that we do. And when we get to that point, likely in the second half of the year, look for a lot more jobs to be added across the country. But the employment levels, they are going to rise, but they're going to rise for a reason that most people aren't actually thinking about. And it's because I believe that the public, as they feel more comfortable going out, they're going to go shopping again. In fact, it's my forecast that spending will rise very significantly later this year. And that's going to give a much needed boost to the economy and obviously to the job market. You see, we haven't been spending our hard-earned dollars at normal levels for almost a year now. And to be honest with you, the cash that we have been hoarding away since the pandemic started, well, it started to burn a hole in our pockets. So my number one prediction is that we'll see significant economic growth and job gains this year, but most of the growth is going to come in the second half of 2021 and not the first. So you have to be a little more patient for a little longer. Number two, the move to the burbs. Looking at housing now, there's been a lot of talk about a COVID-19 induced flight away from cities and into the countryside. Well, the numbers certainly don't lie. There has been more interest from buyers looking at markets outside of our core metros, and this obviously is a function of the work from home phenomenon. And the work from home phenomenon, by the way, it's not just a flash in the pan. It's real, and I believe it's going to be in place for a very long time, if not forever. But there's a bit of a wrinkle in this theory. Inasmuch as we're certainly seeing suburban flight from markets like New York and San Francisco here on the West Coast, the same can't be said for much of the rest of the country. In fact, according to a study recently published by LendingTree, the percentage of owners who moved out of the top 50 largest metro areas in the country in 2020, just 2.2%. Now that is up from 1.9% in 2019, but it's hardly the tsunami that many had anticipated. And it's also worth mentioning that some of the markets within Windermere's own footprint, well, they actually saw a net increase of migrating homeowners, not a drop. And examples of this include Denver, which saw the number of households moving in up by 3.6% in 2020. Portland, Oregon, up by 3.4%. Here in Seattle, it was up by 3.3%. And down in Sacramento, California, net immigration of homeowners was up by 2.9%. Although some households will move because work from home allows them to relocate to cheaper markets, it doesn't mean that we are all headed out into the wild blue yonder. In fact, it's my contention that even though a good number of households will move, many will stay within striking distance of their workplaces. And I say this because I expect the work from home concept to be one where we work part-time from our homes and part-time still from offices. My number two forecast, although people will move away from some of our core cities this year, many will still stay in the same region, as work from home will not be a full-time situation for a majority of workers. Number three, the apartment market. Well, the apartment market was and is massively impacted by COVID-19, with rising vacancy rates putting significant downward pressure on rents in many large markets. And again, I will cite here in Seattle, San Francisco, Boston and New York. But guess what? We're actually seeing rents still rising in many smaller cities, and these include Boise, Idaho, Fresno, California, Tucson, Arizona. And this move away from expensive apartment markets is occurring for several reasons, not least of which is, again, work from home. But it's also due to an increasing number of renters turning into home buyers. But it's also due to one other factor. The rent premium that you normally get from living, quote, close to the action in major cities, well, that has faded. And because of this, I see previously overlooked suburbs and smaller metro areas benefiting from significantly growing demand. 2021 is going to be a tough year for many landlords in our larger cities, not just for the reasons I've already talked about, but also something else as well. We are going to be bringing online 400,000 new apartment units this year. And guess where most of these units are? You got it, in our larger cities. So, number 3 forecast, apartment owners in pricey markets will continue to suffer this year. I'm afraid I do expect to see improvement in 2022 though. But smaller markets, well, they're going to perform rather well. And after many years of being overlooked, I'm also forecasting that apartment developers will start to turn their attention towards suburban markets and away from many of these larger cities. We haven't seen that in, over a decade. Number 4, luxury housing. Well, I admit, one of the sectors that really performed far better than anyone, including myself, had anticipated last year was the luxury housing sector. And I do expect this sector to be very robust again this year. And the reason for this, primarily, will be interest rates. Jumbo mortgage rates, which saw a spike at the start of the pandemic, have since dropped significantly. And this, naturally, is benefiting buyers of luxury housing. And buyers of luxury housing, I think they're going to be very active this year across the country. But many are actually going to start focusing in on some secondary markets. Why? Value. But that said, I still expect that the classic luxury markets like the Hamptons, for example, they're also going to do very well as well. And other markets where the luxury sector will outperform, I'm looking at Miami. But the reason for this, again, is a bit different. It's mainly due to tax changes that are occurring in New York City, and those are driving owners to relocate. They're heading down into Florida. Here on the West, I'm also looking at Southern California, and I believe that luxury homes down there, they're also going to outperform this year. One more thing I would mention is that I also expect that as the country starts to reopen post-COVID, we're also going to start to see a rebound in foreign buyers as well. So that's something you might want to keep an eye on. Forecast number 4, the luxury housing market will be more robust in 2021 than many had, and some still do, anticipate. Number 5, zoning. I hope that many of you will be more than aware of my ongoing concerns regarding housing affordability, or the lack thereof. And now, we've seen some cities like Minneapolis, and even some states, and here I'm specifically talking about Oregon, start to implement significant zoning changes to allow for more new home developments in their markets. And that's certainly impressive, and I applaud them. But it's certainly not happening everywhere. However, I believe that this year we will, at long last, start to see more attention from legislators when it comes to increasing the supply of land for residential construction. And many will do this by adjusting current zoning policies to allow more land upon which to build. So why this new focus, you might ask? Well, their attention is going to be driven by worries that high housing costs in their own markets might lead businesses to start to look at cheaper areas and possibly move away. Other businesses that are thinking about expanding into new markets, well, they're going to be increasingly thoughtful about how housing costs in potential expansion markets will impact how much they have to pay their new employees. You see, we know that almost every jurisdiction across the country is suffering from significant shortfalls in revenue. And because of this, legislators will have to start focusing on attracting new businesses and retaining as many businesses as possible in order to replenish their coffers. Forecast number 5, although it won't happen overnight, I am hopeful that discussions around zoning changes will start to pick up some steam in 2021. Next up, adaptive reuse. Over the past several months, many of you have asked me whether we will see office buildings convert to residential uses as there will be fewer workers occupying those office spaces. Well, I'm sticking to my belief that the cost of conversion and the layout of office buildings, primarily due to core depth, lack of plumbing penetration and those kinds of things, well, they just don't lend themselves to conversion to residential uses. That is, unless you buy them at below bankruptcy prices. That said, I am expecting to see other building types that may be better suited for conversion into either a single residential use or a mix of uses start to become attractive to developers. And what are the other product types, you ask? Well, likely, unsurprising to you, is that I'm looking at hotels, which are going through a terrible time right now with a lack of people staying there. That's going to be, I think, a player in that marketplace. But not just hotels, also malls, retail malls and strip malls. You see, we are already seeing more hotels, mainly inns and motels as opposed to major urban hotels, be listed for sale as they're just not providing adequate cash flow. And I expect that some, but certainly not all, may be ripe for conversion into residential uses. And as far as malls are concerned, I look for more interest in conversion of regional malls into mixed-use projects, but strip malls might get rezoned into single residential uses. Number 6, developers will start to pay more attention to the reuse of existing buildings in addition to ground-up construction. Next up, the post-COVID-19 home. Well, the pandemic has started to change what we are looking for in a home. And it's actually remarkably interesting to see what's now become important to home buyers. We know that work from home is real, but I see households moving not just because housing is relatively cheaper further out, but I think that many are going to look at their own homes, even if they're on the fence when it comes to moving, and realise that it's just not set up for working remotely on a semi-permanent or absolutely on a permanent basis. How many of you know people that have spent the past several months working from their dining room tables? I'm one. But I also expect to see home sellers who may not have an office in their homes try and create dedicated workspaces for an office setup in order to attract buyers. Or where that's just not possible, I think that they will, at a minimum, create a dedicated Zoom space before listing their homes for sale. I'm also forecasting that you'll see new construction housing reflect these changes as well, with builders better aligning their product with new consumer preferences, and that demand for new homes will rise in 2021 as builders address these new requirements that are coming from home buyers. People want more space today because they are using their homes more than ever. And I already see builders addressing this, with the average new home size rising starting the middle part of last year, following several years where new homes, well, they were actually getting smaller. Also, when it comes to new construction, open floor plans, once a must. Well, they're going to be replaced too, thanks to COVID-19 and buyers wanting more room separation. And finally, I expect buyers who are looking to move a lot further out, I think they're going to become far more interested in markets where they have high-speed internet access. You see, many of us take it for granted, but buyers will start to list this as a requirement rather than an option. Again, this could possibly limit those households who are thinking about moving way out into the country. Forecast number 7, home preferences are changing. Builders are already adapting, and owners of existing homes will have to do what they can to meet these new requirements. Next up, forbearance. Well, since last spring, a question that I've fielded probably more than any other has revolved around the topic of forbearance. Now, the GSEs being Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they have extended the forbearance program to the end of March, so some of the pressure has been removed. But there are a lot of people who fear that when forbearance expires, we will see a flood of foreclosed homes coming online, and that this massive increase in supply will lead to all homes seeing their values drop. Now, it's not going to happen, and here's why. First off, the number of homes in forbearance, well, it's already down by 43% from its May peak. Even though it is true that the pace of the drop in the number of homes in the program has slowed, the trend is still headed in the right direction. Yes, there are still today 2.7 million homes in the program, but I believe that as owners start to get back to work again, many will be able to either refinance their loans or work with their lenders to extend the term of their mortgages in order to make up those missed payments, and most will not end up in foreclosure. I would also add that many owners in the program, if they just can't get back on track, well, they will sell in order to keep the equity that they've built up in their homes over the past several years. And in most areas, there will be more than enough buyer demand, and they'll be able to get out from under forbearance by selling and paying off the mortgage and missed payments that way, as opposed to going into foreclosure. Now, of course, it would be silly to say that foreclosure rates won't rise. They will. But I just don't see the majority of owners in forbearance be forced into foreclosure. And I believe that that will limit the downside risk to the housing market in general. That said, I am a little bit more worried about condominium owners who are in forbearance. Why? Well, we've seen the supply of condominiums on the market on the rise already. And this is causing home price growth to soften, certainly when you compare it to single family homes. Now, this is not a phenomenon spread broadly across the country, but many markets are certainly seeing condo price growth slow. And some, here I'm specifically looking at Queens in New York, Suffolk County in Boston, San Francisco County, where they are seeing real price declines. And I do expect to see a greater share of condos end up in foreclosure, but a far smaller share of single-family housing will suffer the same fate. And I would add, all markets are not created equal. Today, total delinquency rates, which obviously includes those in forbearance, in states like Mississippi, Louisiana, New York, Oklahoma, well, massive spikes in the number of homes who are delinquent in their payments, and likely will see a greater increase in foreclosures there. But when I look at Windermere's footprint again, I am delighted to be able to report that the states with the lowest rate of non-performing mortgages, well, they include Idaho, here in Washington State, Colorado, Oregon, and Montana. So forecast number 8, I do not anticipate a wave of foreclosures following the end of forbearance, and that the foreclosures that do occur will have a limited impact on the broader ownership housing market. Next up, mortgage rates. Rates for 30-year conforming mortgages have broken below all-time lows 16 times since the pandemic started. And this is really remarkable. With the average 30-year rate at the time of recording this video, well, it was at 2.65%. I can also tell you that rates are down by over a full percentage point over the course of the last year. And that naturally has allowed prices to continue rising at above average rates. But going forward, I just don't see them dropping that much more. And I believe that we have, at least for now, reached a floor when it comes to mortgage rates. Without getting too academic, I will explain to you that the reason I say this is that mortgage rates track the interest rate on 10-year treasuries, or at least they should. But that relationship broke back in February because of, obviously, the pandemic. However, treasury yields have started to rise again, and that relationship is now back in line, which tells me that rates are unlikely to drop much further. That is all things being equal. Prediction number 9. Mortgage rates are unlikely to drop much more, but at the same time, I don't anticipate them rising too much either, with the average rate in 2021 coming in at around 3.1%. Still remarkably competitive. Finally, number 10. Home prices and sales. I just have to talk about home sales and prices, even if I did cover that in my last forecast video. Given all the factors that I've already talked about, we will see more demand from buyers this year. But at the same time, I also expect to see listings actually increase at long last as people look to relocate. Now, this is going to lead sales in 2021 to rise to a level that we have not seen since 2006. And big players in the housing market, as far as buyers are concerned, will be renters turning into home buyers, I mentioned earlier. But I would also add that we could see first-time buyers. Now, they are going to make up a very major component of the housing market this year, but they could actually be even bigger. And why do I say that? Well, if the Biden administration's goal to introduce a new first-time buyer tax credit gets enacted, well, that could cause a even larger surge coming from first-time buyers, but that's certainly not a given. Overall, I expect to see existing home sales rising by over 7.5% in 2021 to around 6.2 million units. As for prices, well, I see them increasing again this year, but as I mentioned earlier, mortgage rates will start to move modestly higher, and this will be a bit of a headwind to home price growth. Also, affordability constraints. I think they're going to start to slow appreciation, but mainly in those very expensive markets. This year, I'm looking for average sale prices to rise by a relatively modest 4.1%. And the thing to look out for here is that you may well find some sellers, we know home sellers, they have a pretty heady expectations as to how much their home is worth. Well, I think they can actually start to, they will likely push back on some of your valuations as the market moderates somewhat. But I will tell you this, stick to your guns. Your valuations will always be more accurate than a home seller's belief. My final forecast, home sales will rise significantly this year, but home price growth, well, it's still going to be up, but it is going to be up at a rate we haven't seen in the last several years. Oh, by the way, one last prediction that is not on the list. The naysayers out there, those who are still praying for another housing bubble to burst, well, they are going to be out of luck yet again. So there you have it, my 10 crystal ball predictions for 2021. I sincerely hope that you found my thoughts of interest, and as always, if I can be of assistance to you in your business, well, I'm only a phone call or an email away. Bye now.